Every species of animal life has its own particular quirks and ways. Dogs love to sniff anything and everything they come across. Chickens cackle and pluck the ground. Whales lumber through the great oceans. God's great realm of creation offers a remarkable variety of thousands of different forms of animal life. But the pinnacle of His efforts came on the sixth day of creation, when He fearfully and wonderfully fashioned the human being. Evolutionists insist that man is just a step away from apes, but it just isn't true. There's a vast gulf between man and beast. Although other animals have the ability to make various sounds, only man can communicate with actual language. And while animals can respond to their environment, their decisions flow from pre-programmed instincts rather than the freedom of a rational mind. And of course, the greatest difference between humans and other animals is that man is made in the image of God. In other words, humans have the wherewithal to make moral decisions and enter into an actual relationship with their Creator. C.S. Lewis called Earth the silent planet. I think I'd prefer to call it the dark planet. The reason I say that is because of the billions of planets in the universe. To our knowledge, it's the only one that lives under a divine curse. It's the only one that is infested with devils. It's the only one that has experienced sin in all of its evil branches. It's the dark planet because it lies in the power of the evil one, the prince of darkness. Humanity was made for light and life, to live and dwell in the presence of God, but Satan led them into a willing rebellion to God by appealing to their carnal desires. This choice to pursue their desires in direct opposition to God's will caused a kind of spiritual exile from the presence of God and drove them into spiritual darkness. This willing rebellion, this choice to pursue our own desires in direct opposition to God's will, this spiritual exile into darkness away from God's presence is the blueprint of Satan's plan for every human being. It is his end goal and the natural outcome of his godless mindset. One could call this the Babylonian mindset, life without God. In Ephesians 4, Paul paints a clear picture of man's fallen condition and the path he takes to arrive there. So this I say, he begins in verse 17, and affirm together with the Lord that you walk no longer just as the Gentiles also walk, in the futility of their mind, being darkened in their understanding, excluded from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them, because of the hardness of their heart, and they, having become callous, have given themselves over to sensuality for the practice of every kind of impurity with greediness. This short passage of 3 verses is loaded with adjectives that describe the unbeliever's descent into hellish living. Not every godless person sinks to the utter depths of sin described here, but every one of them can be found somewhere on this downward spiral. So let's take a few minutes to consider Paul's description of fallen mankind. He begins this pictorial descent by affirming that unbelievers live in a state of mental, emotional, and spiritual futility. They aimlessly go through life with no higher purpose than to live for whatever pleasure they can eke out on earth. As Martin Lloyd-Jones says, it is a completely empty and vacant life, a life that promises so much and in the end gives nothing in return. No wonder Paul tells us that they have excluded themselves from the very life of God. The life the Lord has for us is an energized life, a clean life, a beautiful life that will go on forever in His presence. But years of sinful behavior has created a callous around the hearts of unbelievers, shutting them off from the life that God alone can impart. They've moved further and further from God, having lost all sensitivity to spiritual matters. As one commentator said, Where there is no feeling, there is no pain. And where there is no pain, there will be no impulse for the search of a remedy. Up to this point, every term he has used to describe the fallen condition of man is true of every unbeliever. These people are hopelessly lost, even if they descend no further into the squalid behavior of perversion he goes on to describe. Most don't plumb the depths of this path, but many do. With atrophied conscience, they easily glide into a life of shameless debauchery. Paul says that they have given themselves over to all sorts of perversions. Such people, and there was a time I was one myself, have willingly abandoned themselves to the worst types of moral corruption. God did not force them into this lifestyle. Satan did not drag them into it. They willingly gave themselves to it. This absolutely refutes the notion that a sexual addict has been a helpless victim of his upbringing. No, he has sold his soul into demonic slavery by the choices he has made in life. And I can't think of anything more enslaving than the two terms Paul mentions here, sensuality and uncleanness. These are somewhat sanitary terms used by translators to cover everything from lustful thinking to lewd and vile behavior. Such people live for the great God of pleasure. They constantly think about it, scheme for it, and worship it. They go from one pleasure to another, never able to find fulfillment, just an endless round of empty acts of indecency. They are so given over to the pursuit of these filthy habits that it has become like a job to them. Sexual vice can be so addictive that Paul says they greedily pursue it, driven by an insane and insatiable appetite for more and more and more, regardless of what it might cost them. What Paul described was a Babylonian mindset that in one degree or another makes up the collective consciousness of 95% of the world. This is life without God. In the next episode, we'll examine what happens when millions of such people live together, each in pursuit of his own particular brand of sin. The effects of this accumulation of sinful beings dwelling together on one planet have been utterly devastating.
Every single day, I can make choices that either allow me to participate in the life of God or that create some kind of barrier or a block in my life, in the heart. And we've all experienced this. We were all in the church,
Right. Yeah.
but we were separated from this vibrant spiritual life because even though we're in the church and hearing the doctrines and listening to the sermons, there's just like there's a huge wall between us and God in the heart and in the mind.
Yep.